The story begins with our protagonist Kim So-hung, but, to not make it difficult, we will call him Kim. He was a boy who was abused every day by the bullies of his school, and the poor guy was so weak he couldn't do anything to defend himself. Until one day, tired of all abuses, he began to think about how the protagonists of the webtoons he used to read went from being completely inept to gods, and wished that a window of missions like that of Saying's webtoons appeared before him. So he started to invoke said window with all of his strength, although deep down he knew said window would not appear. But, when the boy had already given himself in defeat, a window appeared in front of him which said the mission window is being activated. Since then the life of the protagonist did a 360-degree turn, and this is how this webtoon begins. So if you are interested in the story of that boy, stay comfortable and bring popcorn, because today I summarize supremacy and missions. After the window appeared in front of the protagonist, he did not understand if he was going crazy or if he had actually been blessed by a power as great as that of going up a level. For this reason, he had not been able to decide whether to accept the first mission or not. But in the end, he had nothing to lose, so he decides to accept said mission. But when the guy was about to accept it, unintentionally, he ended up touching Baekcha-erin, the typical popular girl of his school, and although the protagonist tries to explain what had happened, the girl let out tremendous slap, thinking he was harassing her. After that, the girl had the nerve of asking him to bring her a store sandwich, telling him that she was a kind of model and was not there to do her own shopping, and, besides, she didn't even give him the money to shop. Yes, the protagonist was so messed up that even a girl gave him orders. And to make things worse, when he was heading to the store, he ran again with the bullies who gave him a beating. The situation was unendurable and the poor guy couldn't do anything. So, when he got home, he apologized to his mother and told her that he wanted to leave school, telling her that he was learning nothing interesting at that school and that he preferred to leave it and start a YouTube channel. Yes, he wanted to compete with me. But his mother told him to stop saying stupid things and calm down because she was holding a knife and she could lose her sanity. What a way to threaten the bot, isn't it? In addition, his sister is also mocking him for his idea of being a YouTuber. Yes, the poor guy was really struggling. Not even at his own house he could have a break. Luckily for him, the system appeared and he finally accepted the first mission. Starting the mission of the system. You will receive a card when finishing the mission. The protagonist is wondering what mission would begin and what type of card the system was referring to. A tutorial mission is being created. Apologize to your mom. 0 of 1. Reward, a golden card. When seeing this, the protagonist was shocked and excited, thinking that if the card was made of gold, he could sell it and get good money for it. So he immediately went with his mother to apologize to her by telling her that he regretted yelling at her before and that he didn't do it on purpose. And by doing it he completed the tutorial mission and received a gold card as a special benefit for completing the tutorial mission. After having managed to meet his first challenge, he immediately claimed the reward, and the card he had obtained had the function of making him grow 3 centimeters in height, so he used it, and as expected, his height was enlarged. Apparently, the system would give him rewards for improving his fitness, and things were starting to get better for the boy because something new was about to begin. The next day at school, the protagonist was beyond happy, and some girls noticed that the guy had gotten a little bit taller. And all this was thanks to the reward he had obtained. This was why the boy was anxious for when the next mission would appear, and luckily did not have to wait too long for this. The next quest appeared and the reward would be much greater than the last time, but what awaited him was this: kiss you with Baekcha-erin 0 of 1. Reward, a golden card and a silver card. Yes, the second mission is quite hardcore as he had to kiss someone that hated him. The protagonist wondered what he had to do. How does he get a kiss from a person who treated him as scum and also saw him as a complete pervert? So he decided that the best thing was to give up on this mission since he had 0 chances to get a kiss from Baekcha-erin. But such was his surprise when, if you surrender now, the rewards you received at the time will be confiscated and the Windows missions will no longer appear. The guy couldn't give up because if he did, he would lose everything he had obtained so far and the window of missions would no longer appear to him. So he had to get that kiss, no matter what. Although saying it was much easier than doing it since he didn't know how he would get a kiss from the girl with the most followers on Instagram in the school. He asked if he should force it or if he should follow another strategy. Luckily, we are now presented with the best character in this story, Yakuza, the best friend of our protagonist. A guy with the face of being a criminal but who, unfortunately, just like our protagonist, was harassed daily. Kim decided to ask him what he would do if hypothetically, had a mission to kiss a girl and that his own life depended on it. The guy replied that the better way was paying for the kiss, something that for the moment excited our protagonist, thinking he was going to pay the girl and could get a kiss, but after thinking about it he realized that it wouldn't work. Luckily, he had another idea to achieve it. So he decided to wait for sports class, since the girl regularly skipped that class, and once both were alone decided to play the whole game. After taking a sip of the milk that the girl was about to drink, the guy asked her if she ever kissed someone. As expected, it did not go very well. The girl asked him if wanted to die. To make things even worse, the bullies who daily bothered him appeared in the room and they began to mock the protagonist. They asked him if he liked the girl, which infuriated him. He told them to delete the video that they had recorded, but in doing so received a heavy blow from one of the thugs and, as every day, he was about to be beaten up, but luckily, Chiron wasn't as bad as she looked and stopped the guys who, after receiving an intense look from the girl, decided to leave. After they did, Chiron told the protagonist it was best for him to leave school earlier to avoid problems. And thus, once the protagonist was at home, he burst into tears because he was not able to fulfill the mission, since this mission had a time limit until school ended. But then, you have completed the mission. Yes, the protagonist had completed the mission, as the girl had drunk milk from the same container as him, meaning they had given an indirect kiss. He obtained the rewards for what the protagonist had fulfilled on another mission and earned 2 new cards. He had obtained a golden card and a silver card. One of them served to improve the mission of our protagonist, so, yes, he no longer has to use his annoying glasses, and the other left the protagonist very surprised, but don't worry, it will be revealed later. The protagonist was beyond excited about everything he had obtained from the system. Unfortunately, the happiness lasted very little, since the next day in school he was again received by the thugs and, just like every other day, he was given a tremendous beating. This one was because they had not forgotten what occurred with Chiron the day before. So, after he had received a tremendous beating, Yakuza apologized to him, saying he couldn't do anything to protect him. But the protagonist told him not to worry anymore, that it wasn't his fault. While he could only suffer and wonder why he had to live that way. But that's not where it ended. During the afternoon, the guys continued to assault the poor man, and while they did it, his sister appeared. She asked the protagonist what was happening and, as was to be expected, the bully said nothing was happening and didn't worry about it. As soon as the girl walked away from them, the guy asked the protagonist why he did not tell them he had such a beautiful sister. And told him to introduce her to him since it looked very appetizing, but when he said this, Yakuza, who was in the same bathroom where they were talking, said he had gone too far. Unfortunately, he received a strong blow followed by a tremendous beating. Luckily, that was the straw that spilled the glass, because our protagonist got into badass mode and remembered the card that he had received the day before, which was a self-defense movement. To be precise, it was the famous boxing jab. Using this movement, he launched a strong attack on the guy, and when he did this happened, a tutorial mission was created. Yes, a new mission had been created. So, the protagonist said he will show him what really was appetizing. And then, without giving the guy any time to react, he began to unleash a burst of amazing jabs. The guy couldn't do anything and wondered what the hell was happening. Why, suddenly, the protagonist had turned into a beast. Yakuza was astonished looking at what was happening, and after a while, the protagonist could fulfill the mission and free himself from the ruffian for whom he had been disturbed for so long. But that wasn't the time to celebrate, as Yakuza told the protagonist they should escape as soon as possible before the rest of the gang arrive. Once both were in a safe place, Yakuza told the protagonist that probably now the whole school would pursue them for what they had done, and also he asked where he had learned boxing so well. The protagonist replied that he had learned everything by watching YouTube videos. Yes, very credible, don't you think? Unfortunately, the place where they were was not very safe, since the group of bullies finally found them. They thought that Yakuza was the one that had beaten up their friend, so they started to hit him. Meanwhile, the protagonist wasn't sure about using his skill, because even though he could beat those guys, he was afraid that the high school leader would appear. He was like such a bloodthirsty guy that he had defeated all the third-year students. But to his bad fortune, Gohan, the high school leader, appeared and asked the protagonist if it was him who had hit the bully. The protagonist had no choice but to admit it was him because the guy had insulted his family. But what awaited us was that Gohan would tell him to try to hit him, because the guy was interested in his boxing skills. Our poor protagonist was afraid and didn't know what to do because Gohan told him that if he didn't, he would be hitting him. Then, Kim remembered the cards he had recently obtained by defeating the bully and wondered if maybe making use of these could help him defeat the monster in front of him, but, sadly, the cards wouldn't be of much help at that moment since one of them only would help regain their physical strength and the other would only help you improve his tone of voice. So things looked pretty bad for him, but he decided to risk it all and using his only movement began to launch blows. However, no matter how fast his movements were, none were able to connect. As opposed to the other guy who with a kick sent him to fly, leaving him unconscious. Upon waking up he realized the power that his opponent had, but he was still not ready to surrender. Although, to his surprise, the guy no longer wanted to continue fighting. He even invited him to eat and said he was sorry about what had happened, he just wanted to check his skills, but the movements of the protagonist had been so good that, by pure instinct, he had returned the attack. In addition to that, he told the protagonist that he had practiced boxing for quite a while and he could see great talent in him. Just like that, things started to change for our protagonist, who realized the system was the best way to improve his lifestyle. But he was wondering what type of mission would come next because up until now he had only done tutorial missions, but no main mission had appeared. The next day the guy he used to bully him invited him to a meeting with Buha and, although at first, he thought that it was a trap to beating him, soon realized that what he said was the truth, since at the meeting he found Chiron and all the students that were popular in high school. Yes, the life of the protagonist had started to improve. He ended up having a good time with Buha Jun's friends and the people who used to humiliate him now saw him as one more of the group. However, this would not last long because the next day when he was going to school with his new friend Gohan, this happened: fight against Buha Jun high school leader and earn 0 of 1. Time remaining, 3 days. Reward, a platinum card. Yes, a main mission had appeared. Unfortunately for the protagonist, that mission was quite hardcore. The protagonist didn't know what to do, even with his best movement he was not able to hit a blow against Buha. How was he going to defeat him? Also, it had a time limit of 3 days to do so. Things looked complicated since the protagonist had begun to spend time with Buha and had realized that he was not a bad guy, so he decided that it was best to give up on the mission now that he had the protection, so it was not necessary to have skills in the martial arts. In addition to that, although he tried, he was destined to fail. But his opinion changed drastically after witnessing Buha brutally beating the guy that used to annoy him for not getting the money needed. Chiron was walking by and told the protagonist he should not trust Buha Jun because he was the one pulling the strings of the bullies, forcing them to get the money from guys like him, and it was better to realize what kind of person Buha actually was. So, after this, the protagonist asks Buha why he was treating him so well. The guy replied that he did it because he was very good at fighting, a thing that worried the protagonist since at the moment he was very good at boxing, but, after failing in the mission, he would again be useless as before. So his decision was taken: he would fight even if he had to leave his life doing it. So after this, in the evenings he began to practice in a nearby park. However, as he did so, he wondered how he would be able to pass the mission if even with his jack he hadn't been able to harm Buha and the cards he had received wouldn't help him much. But while he was analyzing the situation, a few guys appeared in front of him asking for some money for the bus, but when the protagonist said he didn't have any money, one of them, enraged, attacked him. But the protagonist wasn't the same as before and intercepted the blow with a powerful right-wing jab. Your jab's mastery has risen to rank E. And in doing so he realized that his skill had leveled up, so, yes, every time this used said movement his mastery in it would increase, and now that he had managed to climb from level his ability felt much faster when he was throwing punches. Although while he was hitting one of the guys, another mission appeared in front of him: fight against the bad guys and you win. 0 out of 5. Reward, a silver card. There are hidden conditions. Yes, the protagonist needed to face a large number of opponents, something that was unimaginable a couple of days ago, but now everything is different. So as soon as one of them attacked, Kim connected a quick jab in the jaw, knocking him out in a couple of seconds, even going so far as to think that he had taken his life. But don't you worry, he had only fainted. Even though there was no reason to celebrate because he still had to defeat 4 more guys. They began to persecute him and he arrived at a place with no exit, so, after using the restoration of strength seed he had obtained, he faced the next opponent, and using a fantastic jabs combo he managed to eliminate the second guy. Yes, the boy was on fire as he was beginning to become familiar with the jab, and with this done, eliminating the 3 other types was not a problem, since within seconds he had gotten rid of all of them. And, yes, thanks to this he had overcome another mission and got 1 new golden card, but, like the last time, its content will be revealed to us a little later. By the way, if you are liking this summary, don't forget to leave your like and subscribe. I know I'm asking a lot, but with that, you help me a lot for this project to continue growing. But, continuing with the story, the time limit for winning Buha had passed and the protagonist did not know if the cards he had in his power would be enough to complete the mission. But his mind was set on winning because he didn't want to, back to being the loser from before. Also, he didn't want Yakuza, the person who had always been helping him, to be harassed again because of him. However, while our protagonist was talking to Yakuza, Buha appeared to invite him to eat, but while he did it, another boy ended up pouring ice cream against him and, as was to be expected, this made him enraged. But before Buha beat the boy, he was stopped by the protagonist who told him to let him be. Buha asks him if he knew what he was doing, but the protagonist, in the most epic way, replied that of course he did, so shut up and come get him. But, contrary to what we all thought, Buha did not attack him but rather told him to calm down and appreciate that he was loyal to his classmates. Plus he told him that friends should not fight with each other and ended up inviting him to eat. Yes, things weren't going as the protagonist expected. And during the break, he wondered what he should do to fight with Buha because if he did not think something fast, the time limit would end. But while he was thinking about it, Yakuza asked him what was happening and if he was being bothered by Buha, something our protagonist said yes to. You could say that his concern is about him. But while they were talking, Chiron appeared and asked him if it was true that he had been about to fight Buha. In addition to that, she asked him if he thought he could defeat that monster. However, the protagonist asked her why she was with Buha's group, being that she was a good person for having helped him several times, and she told him it was because she felt comfortable with that group. But while they were talking, a guy appeared from nowhere and told the protagonist that something really serious was happening, as Yakuza, after hearing that his friend was being harassed by Buha, decided to confront him and began to look for him among his group, who was about to give him a tremendous beating. But then Buha appeared and asked Yakuza why he was looking, to which he answered with all the courage of his soul, not to bother the protagonist anymore. But Buha ended up answering with a tremendous slap that immediately sent him to the ground and told him that he and the protagonist were good friends. Besides that, he hated people like him, since he didn't even consider him a person and, during the beating, told him that there were ranks in the world and he was in the lowest. So he had to get away from the protagonist. But then the protagonist, in an epic entry using his jab, managed to connect a blow to Buha, since he couldn't abandon the only friend he had and to the person who should have been able to survive him all this time. However, Buha told him if he seriously wanted to fight, and if they were friends, but the enraged protagonist said his only friend was no other than Yakuza. And it is revealed to us that the card he had previously obtained was a strength increase by 5 seconds, that would be the ace up his sleeve to overcome this quest. The rest of the students who were watching the altercation could not believe what they saw. They had heard that the protagonist practiced boxing, but they didn't think he was capable of facing Buha. And then the fight started with the protagonist trying to connect a jab, but with Buha dodging it. After this, Kim did a lot of right jabs. However, none of them managed to connect since Buha's movements were impeccable. Although, from the outside, it looked like the protagonist had a great advantage and they believed that Kim actually had a chance of winning the fight. However, while they were talking, the protagonist received a heavy blow from Buha, who was disappointed in the protagonist, asked him if that's all he could do. Following this, the guy started to have control of the fight by asking the protagonist if he wanted to beat him using the same technique. But then we see the protagonist remembering the night before, where he realizes that the only way to beat Buha was using the card that had been obtained after defeating the thugs, which gave 5 seconds of additional force. So, returning to the present, the protagonist began to try to have an opening to approach Buha. Still, that would not be easy because every time he came a little closer, the monster he was facing connected tremendous blows. Until the end, when all seemed to be lost, our protagonist held Buha, and then, Buha, seeing that the protagonist hugs him, said he would end him. But what surprised him was that Kim began trying to lift him and activated the card under his sleeve. You have used the extra force, so making use of his increased strength for 5 seconds, he managed to pick up Buha and, in an epic scene that came up from Lead vs. Agara, he smashed the guy's head against the floor and, before the 5 seconds ended, he managed to connect a burst of jabs, powered by the ability, to the guy lying on the ground, who couldn't believe what was happening. After the 5 seconds had passed, the protagonist ended up winning against the monster that ruled the high school. You have completed the main mission. No one that had seen the fight could believe what was going on. How has the boy gone from being a scum to becoming the most broken of all high school students? The next day, Buha stopped attending high school and everyone said it was because of the series of injuries that the protagonist had caused him. Now that the monster was gone, Kim had become the new boss of the whole school. By the way, the card he had won as a prize after defeating Buha was a spying one, a card that, as its name indicates, would help him spy on his opponents. Although the protagonist was disappointed since he had been waiting for a card like the jab one. After this, as Kim and Yakuza headed to their class, everyone was talking about them. Rumors that the protagonist was bloodthirsty would be scattered throughout the school. As they walked, they ran into first-year students who had a rather peculiar aspect, and those guys placed themselves under the orders of our protagonist. However, he told them to go away, as he was not interested in belonging to a gang. So, without any more options, the guys went away. Yakuza explained to the protagonist that these guys used to serve Buha to help him meet his goal, but he got tired of them and sent them to fly. That objective was to unify Kangbukseo, meaning the city, since this was like a battlefield with 4 schools fighting to expand their territory, and what the guy wanted was to defeat the other schools with our protagonist. However, he wasn't willing to get involved with guys as twisted as those. But then, a mission was created. Rule in Kangbuks High School. 1. Win the first-year students' confidence in Kangbukseo High School. 0 of 1. With the goal of reigning the school, yes, he had to get involved with the gangs because if he did not accept he would lose everything, and sooner or later, everyone would find out that he was weak again. So he had no choice but to accept the quest, so he told the first-year students that he accepted their proposal and he would be responsible for unifying Kangbukseo. After this, while our protagonist is talking to Chiron, it is revealed how his new spying ability worked. This was that he revealed all the information about the strengths and weak points of the person in whom he uses it. Although in doing so, the person felt, let's say, harassed and, because he had tried Chiron, he ended up receiving a strong slap. After this, the first-year guys will explain to the protagonist how everything works since, and I did not tell you this yet, the protagonist had obtained the mission to become the leader of the gang. So, in the end, he ended up agreeing to work with those guys and they explained to him that Kangbukseo was a battlefield with the 4 schools fighting for expanding their territory. Although the protagonist told them he didn't want to intervene in that, the guys told him that this was no longer possible since the other leaders already knew about him and surely they would come for him. In addition to that, a meeting would soon be held with all 4 schools meeting peacefully to talk, but, as was to be expected, our protagonist refused. After this, we see how the leaders of the other high schools had been aware Buha had been defeated and eager to meet the face of the new leader of the West High School, and what better place to do so than the upcoming meeting. On the other hand, they show us the protagonist agreeing to attend the meeting because, unfortunately, the system had ordered it. But this seems to me like a good time to leave the summary. Although, after this, many things happen like the protagonist starting a war against the leaders of the other 3 schools. In addition to this, Chiron begins to feel something for Kim, and the cards he obtains keep improving his combat skills. So, what's coming next is epic.